Avengers! Assemble.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Excelsior, the world's #1 Marvel's Avengers podcast and also a Spider-Man review podcast. This is a special bonus episode dedicated to Venom, Let There Be Carnage. I'm your director, Christian Buckley, joined as always by the Apex... Are you the Apex Predator now? We're talking about Predators today, Jack.
You're talking about Predators today? Oh yeah, I guess we are talking about Predators with Venom and Carnage.
Yeah.
Sure, I could be an Apex Predator. Excelsior, Christian. To start, nothing fell in front of me.
Wonderful.
Nothing imposed imminent danger to my health and safety during this showing that I went to see. So, at the bare minimum, I came out of the screening unscathed. So that was good.
That's very, very good. Yeah, why don't we just start with that, the theater experience, right? Because I think we did that for Shang-Chi also, because you and I, like many people, shocker, we enjoy going to the movies. Don't go a lot lately, you know? So when we do go for these rare Marvel flicks, it's quite an occasion. At least I try to make it one. Do you?
Yeah, it's like what you said, it's been a weird year, obviously, in terms of movies, where I've gone to see 3 or 4 at this point. I actually saw 2 movies this weekend. I saw Venom and The Many Saints of Newark.
Which one was more disappointing?
The one we're about to talk about.
Ooh,
well,
okay.
I don't know. I guess I didn't have too many hopes for this one. I actually liked Many Saints of Newark. Some people are kind of mixed on that, but yeah, like it's we haven't really been able to see too many movies. So I've pretty much every time I've gone to a movie this year, I've gone to a theater with like lounge chairs that I can like recline in and stuff. So I kind of try to make the most of it.
Very nice. Yeah, I went with Omar, a friend of this show, and us. And it was fun. We replicated. We went together to see Venom in 2018, and that was a blast. I had a equally as fun a time this time. Theater was surprisingly like crowded for pandemic times, I guess. In a Sunday night showing, which surprised me. There was probably like, in addition to me and Omar, maybe like 15 other people there, which felt like it was more than Shang-Chi when I went with my girlfriend, but yeah, no light fixtures fell. Nothing happened like that.
Yeah.
So.
Similar to you, I replicated the experience by going by myself. Bit of a tough sell for my girlfriend or other friends. And also, I just like going to the movie theater by myself. That's something I've done since college. And it's honestly like one of the great experiences because you can show up whenever you want. I love to show up super early. So I showed up early, just kind of sat there. It's great. And I haven't done that since the pandemic. So it's been good. It was good to do that one time. And similar to you, there were a decent amount of people in the theater. Like there were probably people in every row, like not filled, but there were definitely, people in each row. So it was a decent amount of people, and I saw it on Saturday at 2:30. So it was a matinee show.
Very nice. Well, before we get into it, Jack, we're talking about people being there, right? We're talking about a lot of people surprisingly showing up for Venom. Oh my god, the overall gross for the weekend, according to Box Office Mojo, $128.5 million opening weekend.
Yeah, huge. I think it surpassed the original Venom.
It did, yeah. So it's breaking records for its own franchise at this point. I think it's probably breaking October records too, because I think the initial Venom release, I think it was actually outdone by Joker shortly after, but I think Venom 2018 was the highest grossing debut of a film in October, like ever, when it initially came out. So I imagine that is a stronger opener than Joker was. So yeah, wild to see that number.
It's especially crazy considering that Venom 2018 came out in a normal year with no pandemic raging throughout the world. And this surpassed that. That is so incredibly surprising. I don't think anyone would have guessed that. Like that's kind of weird to think about. Like I guess as the months have gone on, even though case numbers are still pretty high, there is like a decline at the moment, but even though those numbers are still pretty high, people are still going to the movies according to these numbers and some other numbers that we've seen for MCU movies and other films. So great for the box office, honestly. Really great for theaters. So that's my main takeaway from this.
Yeah, for sure. And we can circle back to this later because I'm sure this is a conversation we'll have as we discuss the movie, but I think it is bonkers that in terms of Marvel properties, Sony's Venom film in 2021 might be financially the most successful Marvel film financially until the other Sony Marvel movie later this year, which is insane to me. And I think this will go to their head very, very quickly.
Yeah, like Spider-Verse is alive and well at Sony, let's just say.
Oh, yeah. So why don't we get into the actual discussion of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. General thoughts to start out. What did you think overall? Should the Agents of Excelsior go to the theater for this film? Because you can't watch this one at home.
No, you can't watch this at home. I'll be as positive as I can up front. I think it was slightly more fun than the first one, and I would certainly rather watch this one than Venom 2018. But I wouldn't rush out to see this movie. I would not recommend people rush out to see this movie. It's unfortunate that the best part of the movie is the end credits scene, but I guess that's debatable. But I think a lot of the problems I had with the first movie are still kind of here. The acting is kind of all over the place, especially with the villain in Woody Harrelson and the main character with Tom Hardy in Venom. I just can't get a sense of Tom Hardy's character, really. Like the humanity in his character for me is just like not there. Like I cannot empathize with him in the slightest, which is unfortunate. It also just feels like this was written by a 13-year-old. Like the comedy in this is not funny, like at all. I think maybe I laughed once in the movie. And they kind of gave up on any horror aspects that the first Venom introduced. And this is like solely a comedy, pretty much. That's, to me at least, not funny. So like I had a slightly better time with this movie than the first, but I still don't really like this movie. How about you?
I had a great time. I think it is at least as enjoyable as the original Venom film. I think I'm still like on the edge of which one I like more, but I do think that in the last like 20-30 minutes, it goes places that might push it beyond the original Venom for me. And like it's no secret, I really, really love the 2018 Venom movie. And the fact that this one kind of just picks up where that one left off and just does another Venom story is nice, I guess, considering I know we can get into this in just a second, but I know one of your major issues last week for Venom 1 was that it's a super slow start for you. And that is absolutely not the case here. So I think it's fun. Should you see this in theaters? I think that is entirely dependent on how you feel about the original Venom film. If you enjoy it, if you have fun with it, it's worth going to the theater to see. It's worth showing up for. And the post-credit scene, I think, is a good theater reveal. It did leak. But yeah, I think if you enjoy Venom 2018, you should go see it in theaters. Because until... like, Spider-Man is the only known quantity releasing for Marvel for the rest of this year. So, unless you really want to go see Eternals, this is a good fix for now. Why don't we get into spoilers?
Let's do it.
Jack, please, you said you laughed one time. Please tell me you laughed when Woody Harrelson's serial killer Cletus Cassidy bit the head off a priest in a church and called it a fucking power-up.
No, that was certainly not. I honestly don't remember when I laughed. that I can blatantly say no. That was not
dude,
what I laughed.
That moment, that killed. That was beautiful. That was art. That was so good. I loved that.
Like, again, I really feel like this movie was written by a 13-year-old. Like,
oh yeah,
in a lot of ways. Like, I don't mean to sound like pretentious at all, but it felt like the whole movie felt like incredibly juvenile. And Andy Cortez put it in a really great way in the Kind of Funny podcast. I don't know if I'd go as far to say this, but he was like, I walked out of that movie embarrassed to have seen that. I don't think I would go that far, but it was like one of those things where it's like, man, I don't think this movie was meant for me. I think this was meant for like kids in like the 7th grade.
Okay,
who are doing Fortnite dances.
So, I need to try. I didn't really do a good job of saying this during our Venom review. I need to try and articulate why I enjoy these movies, because I think what it is like clearly everybody on set, I think it comes across that they're having just a fun time being complete idiots and goofballs and doing this ridiculous shit. And I think, does that translate to like a compelling character story or interpersonal relationships? No. But I think the fact that they're having fun in these roles and these performances, like Michelle Williams, she clearly had a blast doing this. Like, I loved her in this. She was eating up every single line of dialogue she had with these ridiculous alien things. Like, I just think it's fun and very refreshing in a way that I think the MCU and the Marvel Studios films, as much as I love them, and a lot of them are better than Venom and Venom 2, do feel formulaic at times, and this is very much not that, for better or worse, and I just find enjoyment in how absurd these movies are, I think.
I do appreciate especially Tom Hardy's dedication to this role. Like, he has credits in the story.
Yeah.
Or for the story of this. Like, is kind of like, I feel like after the like critical backlash of Venom 1, like that could be enough to make someone like disassociate themselves from that role, or like not want to be as like involved. But he like sort of doubled down, and I feel like that's kind of this movie in a nutshell. Is like they kind of really doubled down on what happened in Venom 1 in terms of like tone and things like that. Does not work for me, but I do appreciate the effort.
Yeah, I saw an interview with him last night talking about Venom 2, and apparently he was like talking to Andy Serkis pretty much daily about story stuff, and he took a lot of the criticism of the first film to heart. And I think that shows kind of in the fact that most of the like genuine criticism or stuff I heard about Venom 1 was the pacing, was just the first half of the movie. And I don't, like you said, like the first half of Venom 1 has some horror element to it, and both of us enjoyed that, but pretty much nothing from the first 40-50 minutes of the original film has anything like comparable in Let There Be Carnage. Like, it's pretty much all second half of Venom. The things that the fans really enjoyed about the first movie, a lot of the rare positivity critics threw out there for Venom 1, like you said, I think he doubled down on. So I also respect his commitment to it. I think the commitment and care shows, even if it is just super goofy. And that's why I'm able to have a fun time with it, I think.
Yeah, I think what doesn't work for me is, like, I appreciate how they are trying to be very comedic in this, and that was a choice from Venom 1 that carried over, where they didn't want to be, although there was a balancing act of being like incredibly self-serious, which didn't work, and trying to be funny, which for me didn't work, so nothing worked in that movie. And they were just like, you know what, let's ditch the seriousness and let's just be comedic. again, that doesn't work for me, but I think it kind of reminds me of the transition from Thor 2 to Thor Ragnarok, where they're like, you know what, let's just completely restart and be a bit more tongue-in-cheek and be a bit more humorous. And I think it works for that movie because there's still heart to the characters in that movie, where I feel absolutely nothing for any of the characters really in this movie, which is unfortunate. Like I feel like if they did like develop, or at least they tried to develop the relationship between Eddie, Brock, and Venom in this, but it just didn't completely work for me. It was just kind of a nonsensical butting of the heads that I feel like I've seen 1,000 times before. But yeah, it just there's really no heart to this movie for me.
So let me ask you this: historically, Venom has been a villain, right? I know some of the comics recently has shifted Venom to be more of an anti-hero, and it seems like that's the angle they take with the films. Do you think any of that history of Venom and Eddie Brock being a villain in like the media we grew up with, do you think any of that is being like carried over into why it's hard for you to connect to Eddie? Because like Eddie, like in the films, definitely isn't a good guy, but to me the way I look at him is the way I look at like the cast of Always Sunny, where what he's doing is entertaining, but I recognize he's a bad person and is pretty selfish and kind of a bumbling idiot. But the stuff he's trying to do in terms of working with Venom and trying to, for the first half for Eddie at least, figure out what he's supposed to be doing right now, and then for the second half trying to mend a relationship with Venom, is enough of a through line for me to follow, the way that the gang in Always Sunny is trying to do a scheme, you know? Like for me, I'm looking at it at that angle more than like, I mean, I don't really care about his relationship with Annie, right? Because like, why would I want that for him? But the stuff they present for his conflict as a bad person trying to just do something is entertaining. Like I said, the way I think Always Sunny's can be.
Yeah, I actually really don't care about them adapting the history at all. Like this could be, and I'm honestly really not familiar with the history of Venom.
Okay.
Like some people have said like the way he speaks and the way he kind of does do like his one-liners or whatever is kind of consistent with the character in the comics. I'm really not familiar with that, so that's not something that I'm hung up on. It's just sort of I don't know, it's just the interactions between them, and really like any of the interactions between any of the characters in this movie, I'm just like, oh man, like it's just, for lack of a better term, it's very cringy in a lot of the dialogue of this movie. And in 2018, I did appreciate in this them choosing not to, when Anne like continues her relationship with Dan, them choosing not to make Eddie as jealous as he could have been. Like he was obviously like he had a difficult time like getting through that, but it wasn't. I was waiting for this movie to make room for Eddie and Anne to get back together, and that never happened. And I did appreciate that. Like that was one thing about this movie. I was like, oh, okay, well, they didn't make Eddie like this completely jealous ex, and then they didn't. I really thought they were going to kill Dan off at the church scene, but they didn't end up doing that. So that's something I appreciate. But yeah, Venom's history as either a villain or an anti-hero really like doesn't really paint my opinions about the movie. It's just sort of the workings of what we see on screen.
Okay, yeah. I was just curious because I know that's a critique I've heard for like lots of antagonistic led movies in the past, of just like, I remember it was a huge conversation around Joker and like why Suicide Squad didn't work, the original one. Like people came into it like, I just don't care about this dude, he's a shitty person. So I didn't know if that was like the similar sort of disconnect, because I understand that is a thing that can be a holdup for people for sure in a comic book or any type of action or genuinely any type of movie, honestly.
Yeah, for me, it's more the confusion of what his character is trying to accomplish. Like,
Sure.
he's back as a journalist now, and he's doing that work, but like, is he trying to be a hero with Venom? Like, I guess that's sort of the conflict of this movie. And by the end of it, we're left with them just sort of chilling by themselves. I guess sort of figuring it out, like being fugitives. But I feel like the driving force of this is not him trying to do the right thing. It's just him sort of getting involved in a situation and having to get out of it.
Yeah, and at least the Eddie Brock that I'm familiar with, like, he seemed like, and again, this is mostly based off of like the animated series and a couple games. Eddie Brock always seemed like a collateral damage with the symbiote, because initially Peter got rid of the suit and the symbiote found Eddie as a means to get back to Peter. So like, Eddie's always kind of been this like shitty dude that's just forced into the Venom life. And I think, yeah, him and his whole struggle in the movie of wanting to be a journalist and doing what he's doing and trying to have his life back, but Venom pulling in the opposite direction. I am with you where like it's like I'm curious to see where that resolution ends up, and because they definitely leave it off on like a question mark with the whole fugitive of the law thing. But I don't know. I think it's interesting that, in the words of Andy Serkis, it's a romantic film. It's like a romantic comedy about Eddie and Venom trying to work out their problems together. And in the end, they realize they need each other. Like, I don't know. In execution, it's definitely goofy, but I think going that route instead of the whole Eddie and Annie sort of thing that you were expecting, I kind of like. And I also, in just from a concept level, I enjoy that they're using this IP and very iconic character to just kind of fuck around with experimenting with weird genres in a Marvel superhero movie, and some of it working, I think.
Yeah. What was I going to say? I was going to say something else I appreciated. Was the I guess like the more, excuse the pun, but symbiotic relationship between Eddie and Venom in this. Like at points, like there was the point where Venom like scopes out Carnage's or Cletus Cassidy's jail cell and like essentially helps him be a journalist. Like there is that, you get that sense of them working together. And when they're apart, like they realize they do need to be together. So that, I feel like that was a good focus for this movie, for them to, like what you said, for them to focus on them like actually needing each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe it's a case-to-case thing, but exploring that type of story through the tropes and like format of a romantic comedy, for me it worked. I thought it was fun. I understand why someone wouldn't like it though.
Yeah, no, that's I think the format for me is like really what held it back.
Sure.
I loved the taste of the horror elements we got in Venom. Like they're very small, but they were definitely present, and I loved that. And I think for me, that would have been a really interesting focus for this series. They completely went the opposite way, which for me is not necessarily what I was looking for. I really would have loved, especially like with this golden opportunity of Carnage, I'm like somewhat familiar with him from, I'd say more specifically like the video games, but like he's this crazed symbiote, and I feel like that would have been a really interesting path for them to pursue with him being the villain, and to have this more as like a, I guess, horror, or not, I guess more violent, but like more graphic film. And this ends up being like a rom-com, and it just, that juxtaposition does not sit very well with me, or if that feels like a missed opportunity.
I can definitely see that. I always was more interested and knew more and cared more about Venom than Carnage. I'm familiar with Carnage, the extent of it, is that Neversoft PS1 game, honestly.
Same.
But yeah, I could see a world where, like, if they didn't do Carnage in this, or looking at the way they did do Carnage, from a fan's perspective of maybe being disappointed, I just don't have anything to base that off of. I will say it's weird because the 90-minute runtime, I think for the type of story they're telling, the focus being about Eddie and Venom's relationship, that works for, I think, the structure and the runtime. And then when you throw Cletus and Carnage in the mix, the movie that you're talking about maybe seeing and maybe having as the hypothetical sequel, I think would have been more so along the lines of them doubling down on the first 40 minutes of Venom rather than what got positivity, you know, in the first one. So I understand why we didn't get it that way. I do think it would have been interesting if the Carnage storyline was more of a detective thing. And we got shades of it here, but it was not the focus at all. So I can definitely see having just want that out of this instead of the 90-minute rom-com, you know?
Yeah, and again, like, for me, like, I'm not super familiar with like Venom or Carnage from the comics, but like the title is Let There Be Carnage, and I feel like what we saw in the movie did not live up to that title. So yeah, and I don't know. I think the issue with the first 50 minutes of the first movie is we didn't even get to see Venom at that point. So I think if you took slightly more of a serious tone than we have in this movie and apply that to like the rest of the movie and focus more on Carnage as like a sadistic person rather than him being locked up in jail for a significant portion of the movie, and rather maybe have like Eddie hunt him down or something along those lines. I like your mystery aspect. I think that could have been really interesting. I saw some review compare like parts of this movie to like Zodiac. And I'm like, no, but like it could have been though. I feel like that could have been an interesting avenue for Eddie to be a journalist, and rather than talk to Cletus through a jail cell, try to hunt him down. That could have been, I feel like, a really interesting movie. Obviously, that's a hypothetical that I'm thinking about, but
yeah, and
what we got, I just don't think was as interesting as the possibilities.
Sure, and like I understand why or how that could be cool and what that would have been like, but like at the same time, that's not where Eddie Brock is as a character right now, you know? Like his whole thing is he doesn't want to be doing that. He wants to be doing his I want to be famous. I want my show back. I want my journalism to be what's going on for my life. And the whole adventure mystery solving thing doesn't really matter to him as much, or doesn't feel like it matters to him that much.
But isn't that what he's doing in the movie though? Like
he
pursuing
is
those leads?
But it seemed very reluctant. Like when Venom split from him and then he ended up going to look at the home, didn't he have a line of like I can't believe I'm doing it or something like that, like before he got up from his desk to leave and go like investigate the lead? Like the detective was also pushing him real hard on like actually doing his job, because like I guess at the root of it, Eddie Brock just isn't that good of a person with good motivations or selfless interests. He just wants his life to be the way he wants it to be, and he kind of just begrudgingly goes along with it, you know?
Sure. He is a very much like a neutral character.
Yeah.
Like no good, no evil really.
Mm-hmm.
Like somewhat gray.
Yeah, all the good he does is like out of obligation to make sure Venom doesn't get him in trouble. Like that's
pretty much, yeah.
That's the thing that I find interesting, and why exploring the two of them as a relationship angle is interesting to me, because Eddie gets his show back. We don't or he didn't get his show back, but he got like a successful income.
He's again back on top.
Yeah.
As they had to hammer home.
Yeah. Him getting that back isn't really explored much, but he still is sort of evaluating what Venom means to him after he gets it back, and that's when the split happens. But I think it's a movie that deals a lot with his consequences. Maybe not directly, but in the end, having to reunite with Venom and realizing that they are symbiotic. I think it's a fun arc that would work with no other character in Marvel's long history of characters, you know? So taking that specific arc and putting it on a genre or a twist that deals with relationships isn't what you'd want, I don't think, out of a Venom movie, but it maybe could only be done with a Venom movie, if that makes sense.
Sure, it's unique in that aspect. I think on paper that sounds interesting. In execution, it is just an abysmal mess, in my opinion.
Sure, yeah, because I do have a couple things I don't enjoy about it. Like, I feel like the Cletus stuff didn't hit for me until the last 20-30 minutes. Like, that's what I was saying at the top of the recording. I was into literally everything except Woody Harrelson and his girlfriend. That is until sort of like maybe the church scene. And then it kind of cranked it up for me of like, oh, now Carnage is actually doing stuff that warrants Carnage being involved in this story, I guess. So yeah, I think the whole plot of him and his girl could have been handled better throughout the rest of the movie. Like, that was kind of just pretty boring for me. And like you said, most of I wouldn't say it was cringy, but some of the things I was like, this is stupid, was just a lot of the dialogue he had. Looked like he was having fun, though, and I think that helped. But did you laugh when he jumped up on the gas station counter and then just kicked the dude in the face, and then he's like, oh, how's the internet work?
No, because I hated seeing Carnage hack a computer and then spit out information, and like the Carnage, I was very confused by that. I'm like, is Carnage doing that? Like, why is it all red? Like, that was so weird. He had his own UI or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think the villain is better than the character I can't remember from the other movie. At the very least, I feel like Carnage is a slightly more compelling villain. I wish they further that and made him even more compelling, because you're sort of like introduced to him and he's behind bars and he's going over his lineage or his history, and he's talking about like all of the family members he's killed. And at the end of the movie, he's like, you didn't realize that I was doing this because I was abused the whole time. And that's just like an example of like, oh great, they had to tell us through exposition, and not like from the moment we could have met him, we could have had that experience of feeling some sort of sympathy and empathy for him. Mm-hmm. But we don't get that until the end of the movie. And then the line of him saying like he just wanted to be friends with Eddie, I did not get that throughout the movie. I feel like that was a line thrown out there that was not sort of backed up by what we saw throughout the rest of the movie. So like at the end of the day, I didn't really care for his character. I guess I did more than, was it Riz Ahmed's character from Venom, but that was pretty much it. I feel like that was a very low bar that Woody Harrelson was able to get over.
But Jack, go with me real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're supposed to, because immediately after that line, Venom's like, fuck this guy, and he bites his head off. Because it's like, yeah, what's the fucking point? You know, he's a serial killer. He's like, yeah, I was abused. And it's like, okay, you can't blame that for murdering 1 million people. And then Venom's sick of it, you know? And then, much like you, wasn't it satisfying being like, okay, yeah, get this dude out of here. He's doing a whack job for this performance, you know? Like, now he's dead. Well-timed F-bomb.
Yeah, but I don't think that's a good thing from a movie, to be like, oh man, I'm so glad this character is dead because I did not want to see him on the screen anymore. And like, to your point, I feel like that is like if we weren't supposed to feel anything for him, then why include that line? Why include the line of him being abused?
I think it was
'cause,
for
like,
the
that-
joke. I think it was for the punchline of his death.
Sure, but like then just why include that at the end? I don't think that squares with the punchline. Because you have the end of him. Like I get Venom coming in and just being like, "Fuck this guy."
Mm-hmm.
That didn't land for me. I'm really trying to think of the line that made me laugh. I don't think I can remember it, but I don't think it was that. I knew they were saving one F-bomb for this movie.
Oh yeah.
And I guess that works. But yeah, at the end of the day, I was like, I didn't really care for the villain, and it's always the villains that are at least like a little bit empathetic, or that you can have empathy for, that you end up enjoying after the movie. But he's not one of them.
Yeah, and I think that might be a detriment. Like, I don't know how I would have wanted them to handle Carnage to make me enjoy Carnage better, but I think, like, I do think the movie that we are talking about could have been cool and could have been exciting is a movie with, let's say, even the same actors, except the lead is Peter Parker. You know? Like, I genuinely think if it's still Carnage, he breaks his girlfriend out and we gotta hunt him down, like, that I think feels like something that would fit in with a Spider-Man movie. And I just don't think that's how Venom exists in the scheme of things. And does that make for a maybe not good movie? Potentially. Maybe. But I don't know. I appreciate it because it's, like I said before, like, refreshing and unique. Is it perfect? No. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it comes back to the original movie too, where I think Venom gets announced to have a new film franchise, right? And the immediate thought is going to be like, okay, it's going to appeal to the hot topic Venom art that's everywhere, the dude bros who love Monster Energy and all that stuff, and Venom is their favorite superhero ever. But, like, he's not cool in the movies. Like, he has this, like, sort of pathetic air around him everywhere he goes. And I just kind of like that. I just like that they're kind of like, yeah, this guy I think is super sick. He's actually a dweeb, and he sucks.
Big dork.
Yeah. I think that's one. I think it's exciting for me as somebody who thought this franchise was going to lean in on the super serious stuff, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, for me, Venom's hasn't been very compelling.
Sure.
I think, like, part of me likes the interaction between Eddie and Venom in the first movie, like, a decent amount. Mm-hmm. And in this, I like them butting heads in a way, but I don't know. Like, Venom is just, they really double down on him trying to be funny in this movie. And I'll emphasize trying to be funny, because it's just, anything he says is just, like, I can't, like, there are points where I'm like, I can't believe, like, they tried to pass this off as comedy. It's just not funny.
Well, if you remember, he is a loser. His whole planet is a loser, you know?
They nail it then.
Yeah. But, like, I'm being genuine right now. I think that's, like, the point. If it doesn't land for an audience, yeah. But I think it's intentional. I do think, like, his stupid humor is, because it's the weird, tricky thing, I think, and, like, that's why I feel like there might be a disconnect, or the reason we're on different perspectives with both of these movies. Like, he's not supposed to be a charming, funny sort of lead, you know? Like, he's supposed to be the disgusting, awkward, babbling idiot that can murder pretty aggressively, you know? And putting that type of person or character into the leading role of a movie, like, I see that's a uphill battle to get people to care about. But as we move on to like other movies, I'm not going to be judging those movies the way I'm judging Venom. Like, I am aware I'm looking at this movie differently than the way I'll look at the Raimi trilogy, you know, in terms of what I'm looking for. Because much like Venom 1, I think it's on purpose. I really think the non-funny shit, I think him... I'm assuming you didn't like when he was talking to the crowd at the rave.
No, absolutely not. That might be like the down point for this movie for me.
But the dude, right after, he just walked away and he's like, oh, she could have seen me tonight, Eddie. Like, come on, that was great, right?
Like, I feel like this was written in a way that just, like, people don't act like this. And I know that it's a movie, obviously, but I could not believe that whole scene. I was like, would people react like this? I don't think so. And that was just, that took the winds out of the sails for me at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the absurdity of it. It's super goofy, but if that's the direction they take to make Venom a somewhat likable leading character, when he's this scumbag, kind of useless player in the Marvel Universe in terms of doing good, I think it's interesting, kind of. And like, listen, this is the same person that thinks The Last Jedi is maybe the best Star Wars movie, and the way that it spits on what people want out of it, you know. So, and I'm not comparing this movie to The Last Jedi. Do not get that twisted. But I appreciate that they lean in on that, and I do think it's on purpose, because I think Andy Serkis and Tom Hardy, I don't think in earnest, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think they genuinely think the stuff that Venom is saying is funny.
I don't know if it's like, he's like what you said, and they spell it out in the movie, and like in both movies, he's supposed to be a loser, and like they certainly nail that. But I think sitting down and watching 90 minutes of a character be, in my opinion, really annoying and unfunny, and like trying to be funny, does not land well. Like you have like friends that like try to be funny, and at the end of the day, it's like, dude, you're not funny. You don't have to try to be funny. But like for 90 minutes, the main character trying to be funny and end up not being funny is very annoying. Is a very annoying experience by the end of that, for me at least.
Yeah, and I don't think you're wrong. You know, like, I think you're right, honestly. But when I look at it from at least the way I'm comprehending this and the way I'm reading this whole thing, the way they're going for it, I think they're nailing it. I think that's why I'm entertained by it. Was there any other stuff in the movie that was a highlight for you outside of whatever you said was a highlight? the Venom and Eddie dynamic? Yeah,
I don't know. Like, again, I guess I appreciate, I do appreciate how they're basically like stopping the romance plot with Anne. Like, Eddie has presumably moved on from that. And I appreciate that in like the extent to him not being like belligerent and him not like trying to get Dan out of the way. That pretty much stops right there. But I do appreciate that at that point.
What did you think of the symbiote action stuff? Because my only issue with it in the first one was when Venom and Riot were fighting at the end, I had no idea what was happening. And here I thought, and I don't think it is just because it's red and black, so it's more distinct, I genuinely thought the action and CG between Venom and Carnage, especially in the church, I thought looked great. And I was a big fan of just that entire set piece. Yeah,
I do think visually it looked good. For them to use like sound in this movie a lot more, I thought it worked pretty interesting. It kind of reminded me of like Vibranium and like how they use sound to sort of like disrupt that. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't like particularly love the end fight, but I didn't dislike it. I didn't think it was bad. I thought it was pretty good. Definitely better than the Venom 1's final fight scene, for sure.
Yeah, and maybe it's just because I'm a sucker for putting a fight scene at a church, like Cowboy Bebop and Kingsman, you know, but like visually I thought it was kind of striking, and like some of the stuff in that fight I think I could imagine seeing in a comic book panel, you know. And they know that. I think they know they have good looking character monster designs, and they do some good looking stuff with it. I was hoping and praying that when Venom got to the top of that steeple, there was going to be like a really cool comic book cover shot of just like the lightning in the background when Venom does like a roar before he jumps on the guy, just to freeze frame it almost. But no, we only got the Carnage in front of the stained glass, which they hung on it maybe a bit too long, but I thought it looked cool, so I was cool with it.
Yeah. Did we saw that in the trailers too, right?
I think so, yeah. I definitely recognize that image.
When we saw the bell, immediately it was like Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
Just my head immediately went to that.
Mm-hmm. I thought also, I know you brought up you wanted more Carnage and stuff, but I thought there were some pretty brutal deaths in this movie. Like the bell killing Frances, right? Was that her name?
Yeah.
That maybe it was just the sound they used or the way they cut it, but I thought that was kind of brutal for PG-13.
Right. I honestly, you already mentioned it. I think the convenience store clerk death was like the most shocking of the movie, and it was like really brutal. Even though like you didn't even see, you saw like the implied action of what he was doing behind the counter. That was pretty bad.
Yeah. What else? The detective, who I guess is gonna be another symbiote in the future. That one was also kind of. I was like, whoa. When he fell like what, a couple feet, and then he got impaled, and they just like didn't show his face, but that one kind of.
I was confused by the end of like what the deal is with his character.
No, me too. And I was going to look it up, but I didn't want to potentially spoil myself on anything. But my friend texted me this morning about what that's in relation to, and they said. I read yesterday that Toxin is so strong that Venom had to team up with Carnage to take him out, and Toxin is the detective in the comics. So, this franchise ain't stopping, Jack.
No, it's certainly not.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly not.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to shout out before we get on to the post-credits. Yeah, I'm blanking, but I had a blast with it. I thought it was very, very fun. Oh, I remember what I wanted to say. The time we wrap up the movie, though, I will say I like the resolution we have between Venom and Eddie, where I thought it was like satisfying from where they kick off everything, because when they sit down in the park at the end and Eddie's like saying, or he's starting to sound like he's going to say goodbye to Venom, and like Venom also shows up saying like, hey, no, this is something that we need, you know, both of us. I bought that, and I thought it was a good final note for both of them to sort of own up to what happened to cause the split in the beginning, you know?
Sure. And the whole Don Quixote comparison.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. With Sonny and Cher just sitting right in front of him. Did you laugh at that? That was funny.
Them bringing the chickens over there?
That when Venom revealed their names. That was fun.
Yeah, maybe. That might have been it.
Okay. Well, you know, one of my largest disappointment with the film.
Yeah, what's that?
That Eminem song sucked.
Did it suck because it wasn't as blatantly Eminem,
yes.
capital Eminem, as the previous one? Yeah, I was like, man, this is really toned down.
Yeah, dude, because I was talking about the movie with Omar when the credits were rolling, right? And then he was like, is this the Eminem song? And this was like 30 seconds in, and I was like, I don't know. Like, maybe it was somewhere else in the movie. But then he comes in like a minute and a half into the credits. It's like, no, okay, I guess that's the Eminem song.
Yeah, you can kind of barely tell.
Yeah, I don't even really like Eminem that much. I just think it's funny that they got Eminem to do the music.
Yeah, it is very funny.
So yeah, that was my biggest bummer for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a big bummer for me, but I guess I'm glad it's toned down. I don't really care either way.
Post-credit time. We kind of nailed it.
Yeah, I think you were the first one to bring this up.
We talked about it a couple weeks ago, right? Because I remember you said last week that you thought it was going to go this way too, but I thought we talked about this in the past as well.
Yeah, I think after I said that, I realized you've said that before.
Okay.
And honestly, I feel like I've heard this from a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because like, ever since the hype about this was sort of unleashed after like some press screenings, I feel like people sort of considered this would be the introduction to the MCU, and I feel like this is probably the easiest venue, at least. And it just, this was not very surprising at all.
Yeah, so the way it all plays out, Venom is talking to Eddie in the Bahamas, basically, that the symbiote are a hive mind. They have millions and eons worth of information that they share, and he's telling Eddie's like, oh, well, show me then. And then he starts to, but something else happens while Venom is showing Eddie something that we don't see. We see a orange pulsing energy wave that shifts the time of the scene from night to day. The room looks much nicer and much cleaner. Eddie's freaking out. He stands up. In the background, you see J.K. Simmons, Jameson, Alex Jones report from the end of Far From Home on the TV. And I do really like that they don't show it immediately. I like that it's sort of just a blink and you miss it sort of thing in the background. How do you like the reveal?
I think honestly this scene gives you a better understanding of like what is going to happen in No Way Home in terms of like the characters interacting with Spider-Man. Like it seems that Venom is like pulled from his reality, like as a character, into the MCU reality, and it seems like that's probably the case for the other villains. Like it doesn't seem like universes are colliding. It's like specific characters relative to Spider-Man in the greater multiverse like converge, and like they're pulled apart and like placed in here. So I thought that was interesting. Like that's sort of my takeaway from this.
Yeah, so you imagine then, because of the imagery, that pulse is the Doctor Strange spell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think you're probably correct in terms of the way they're setting it up. I'm curious how this is going to work alongside the Sylvie breaking open the timeline sort of thing. Like, does the spell go wrong because that's the moment she impales him? Like, is that what it is? Is that why it goes wrong instead of Peter just saying words? Like, I don't know how they'll handle it, but I do agree with you that it's giving us a more solid answer to what's happening currently in the MCU with the multiverse. Maybe specifically for No Way Home, but I feel like it'd be weird if No Way Home has its own isolated multiverse incident next to the rest of the MCU also having a multiverse problem, you know? Like, yeah, I imagine they're all tied together.
Yeah, I think so. I'm skeptical of some of the rules we got from Loki. Like, yeah. I think a lot of people are holding on to the logic of the TVA, but to me, that kind of seems like it's a whole bunch of bullshit at this point. Like, at the end of Loki, like I don't even know how much we can trust. I'm forgetting King's.
He Who Remains.
Yeah, He Who Remains. It very much does. Like at the end of that movie, once Sylvie kills him, like that sets the multiverse in motion. But in terms of like rules and logic, I don't think we have a firm grasp of that yet. Like I think we're purposely not supposed to really know. So I think No Way Home will probably give us, through Doctor Strange and maybe even Multiverse of Madness, will give us better senses of like the rules and logic of what's happening with the multiverse.
Yeah, I think you're probably correct. And I've seen more people coming out recently saying, like, I don't know if He Who Remains was telling the truth, which, like, we'll have to wait and see. But another thing that stood out to me is, did you get the impression that Venom recognized Spider-Man?
Yeah, there was something with he looked to the TV.
Yeah.
And he said, this guy. Like,
yeah,
there seemed like a moment of recognition in a way, or like something about, like, maybe like Venom wasn't conscious of it, but he was like, it seemed like he was saying, like, there's something about this guy that is like oddly familiar, like deja vu in a way.
So I saw a theory about that, mainly because this is within the same scene where Venom is talking about how there's also this shared consciousness of the hive mind of the symbiote. And we know that Venom exists in the same multiverse as Peter, Tom Holland, who also exists in the same multiverse as Andrew and Toby. So I'm blanking on who said the theory originally, but they question, like, because they specifically mentioned the hive mind thing, is that a tip off to the idea that the symbiote that interacted with Toby, Peter, and Spider-Man 3 is like crossing wires with the hive mind that Venom from Tom Hardy exists in, and maybe that's why there's some sort of recognition there.
I like that theory a lot. I feel like for them to bring up the idea of the hive, like, you could have talked about anything before the J. Jonah Jameson reveal came. Like, literally, you could have been shooting the shit about anything, but they specifically chose to talk about what you just mentioned. So I think that's a really interesting theory, for sure.
Yeah. I feel vindicated that Venom is MCU canon now, technically.
So, are the events of Venom and Venom 2 canon? You know, like, because Venom, the character, was pulled into the MCU. So, like, those events, aside from, like, building up Eddie's character, they don't affect the MCU universe? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, obviously, those events are canon to the character, and he can bring those stories with him, but the Daily Bugle we saw in Venom was not the Daily Bugle from the MCU. And, like, the San Francisco that Venom was in did not have Shang-Chi or Ant-Man.
Correct. However, I still count this as a win.
Yeah. Like, I really thought I thought this wasn't even going to be a multiverse situation. I thought the TV would just turn on and Tom Hardy would see Spider-Man. Like, I really thought, like, Venom was taking place in the same San Francisco as, like, Ant-Man and Shang-Chi, you know?
Oh, I was expecting the same thing. That's why I was thrown off when I saw the Doctor Strange pulse, right? Because I really was kind of expecting and hoping this to be, like, the same reason that Iron Man 3 doesn't have any other Avenger in it, you know? It's like the dissonance of how movies work and how the universe works in terms of production. Like, yeah, they couldn't be there, so they're not going to be in the story. I was expecting it to just go that route, you know? They don't have to address the snap. Just say, like, oh, these movies, like Guardians 1 and 2, took place years before we see them again at this other time. Like, they could have very easily explained it away. So the fact that it is introducing multiverse stuff with Venom, I was surprised with. Like, I thought out of all of the Sony stuff they were going to bring in for No Way Home, Venom would have been revealed to have been a player in the MCU this whole time. Because there's, like you said, nothing, I think you said this last week, nothing in Venom 1 or 2, outside of maybe some dates, which could, again, be rewritten, impacts or negates or contradicts anything we've seen in the MCU. So it could have been done.
Yeah. And it makes me, like, kind of confused in a way. We have Mobius coming up in, I think that's supposed to be coming out in January.
Yeah,
And
which surprised me.
right. And Michael Keaton's character of Vulture is in that movie. So and this will be a question, hopefully that's answered, but like, does that movie take place in the MCU? It's like proper? And you know what I mean? Like that was a bit confusing to me. I guess that movie hasn't come out yet, so it doesn't really matter yet, but I really did think Eddie was just in San Francisco and he had no reason to interact with any of the other Marvel characters.
Yeah, I agree. That said, I don't mind that this is the way they're doing it. I think it would have been cooler if it was the other way. But the fact that we're going to get to see, for sure, Tom Hardy and Tom Holland interact, I'm excited about. And Venom licking the TV and having that weird reaction just reminded me of, I think, my introduction to Venom, which we've talked about already, the Neversoft game.
Yep.
Like, in that story within the game, like, I'm pretty sure Peter and Venom have to work together a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire time, Peter's just like, dude, you're disgusting. Stop this. You're annoying. I don't want to deal with this. So, like, I think that's in line with everything we've been talking about with this take on Venom. So I'm excited to see the two of them play off each other. But I cannot lie. I might be a little disappointed that if we see them interact with each other, it's going to be in No Way Home.
I don't think he shows up in No Way Home.
I hope not.
I think and if he does, I think that's an end credit scene to set up the Spider-Man Venom movie. That is inevitable.
I would hope, because I genuinely think there's enough sauce with Tom Hardy and Venom so far that you could make the spectacle of Venom and Spider-Man the focus of an entire movie, instead of he's another ice cream scoop on this already stacked sundae that's falling over and melting as we're watching it, with Willem Dafoe, Alfred Molina, Jamie Foxx, Sandman, and like literally like a laundry list of Spider-Man characters. Adding Venom to that, I think, would take away from the interactions they could be having together, personally.
Yeah, no, I think this scene establishes what's going on in terms of him being pulled in from the multiverse to the MCU, and then he probably doesn't show up at all during the movie. At least I hope he doesn't. And then in like the post-credit scene, he shows up and like sets up what goes next. I think that's probably what's happening.
I hope you're correct, because that would make me excited. I think there's a lot of potential there. Is there any other implications of this that you want to talk about that we haven't brought up?
In terms of the post-credit scene?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it, right? Like, he was pulled presumably by Doctor Strange, or Doctor Strange's spell, into the MCU because he's tangentially related to Spider-Man. I think that will probably be the explanation, is that the reason certain people are being pulled into the MCU is because of the historic relation of those characters to Peter, like through the multiverse, including like comics and things like that. So I think that's probably the implication there.
I think you're probably correct. I said earlier to remember the box office numbers, and the whole Sony Marvel movies probably being the most successful ones of this year. I think we have to prepare for whenever contracts expire again. Sony is going to have the biggest head going into that meeting with Disney that I've ever even thought about in my entire life. Like, a larger dome than The Watcher, I'm talking right now, in those negotiations. So prepare for some maybe wild announcements about contracts in a few years. Just get ready now. Venom is absolutely the most successful Sony film franchise, like, that's not specifically Spider-Man, and they've always been looking for that. They've always been trying to make a franchise, if it's Men in Black, 21 Jump Street, Ghostbusters. Like, Venom is the one that worked, and they will not let anybody forget it. I guarantee you.
And with this movie beating Venom 1's numbers despite a pandemic, you have to imagine that No Way Home could continue that trend, depending on factors with the virus. But Far From Home was $1 billion movie, and you have to think that No Way Home is going to surpass that.
You'd imagine.
So like that will give Sony a lot of leverage.
Yeah, dude. That's pretty baffling to me. And I'm already nervous about how I'm going to be handling seeing that movie. I don't know what's going to happen, but it'll happen.
I'm already worried about that movie for Sony having too much control over it. Mm-hmm. So the future of Spider-Man is not something I'm very excited about until after I see No Way Home, maybe. But I'm very worried about it still, very much so.
Yeah, I'm less so at the moment, but I still think that movie could be a mess.
Oh, totally.
So currently, Venom and Venom Let There Be Carnage are the two movies we have watched for our Spider-Man review series leading to No Way Home. Did we give a star rating last week or no?
On Letterboxd, I gave Venom a 1.5 out of 5 stars.
Okay. Is that like last week's Venom or this week's Venom?
Oh, last week's Venom.
Okay. What did you give this one?
I gave this one a 2 out of 5.
Okay. So some improvement. I gave both of them 3 stars. So I'm still kind of torn on which one I like more. Where are you feeling right now? I imagine you're leaning towards this one. Yeah,
I don't like either of these movies. Like, I genuinely think they're bad. But I would rather watch this movie. It is lighthearted and it doesn't really work for me in a lot of ways, but I think half of Venom 1 is really bad. Like, the first half of that movie doesn't even have the main character in it, and I don't care about any of the characters, and the plot just moves, like, incredibly strangely. Like, the pacing's all off, like what you said. But with this movie, like, I think there is more fun to be had, whether you like that or not. Like, it's very much you like it or you don't. I don't love it, but I would certainly rather watch this movie. So this would be my number one.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm probably with you. And for the sake of the Excelsior ranking, yeah, we can do Venom Let There Be Carnage at number 1 and then Venom 2018 at number 2. I think it will honestly end up being a toss-up for me, which one I prefer given the day. Because I know you don't love the beginning of Venom 1, but the more I thought about it after our conversation last week, I was like, I just enjoy Tom Hardy looking like a fool and acting like an idiot. So there's less of that here. But yeah, I think there's a good time to be had, and I cannot wait for the third one. That's it.
Oh, man. There's certainly going to be a third one.
I saw somebody spell out the Venom threequel, and they wrote V3NOM. Do you think that will be it?
There's going to be a 3 somehow worked in there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I can't wait.
I feel like that movie is a Spider-Man Venom team up.
Yeah, that's my last question, I guess. Do you think that would be the Venom movie, or do you think that would be a Spider-Man 4?
Oh, I don't think that's Spider-Man 4. I think that would be Venom. Mm-hmm. I think Spider-Man's involvement with like the capital S Sony characters are going to be like in this more so in the like the Sony side of things, and like Spider-Man going forward in the MCU will be more, if he's around characters, he'll be around MCU characters, I think.
Okay. Then if we ever do a black suit Spider-Man movie, right? Let's say, because I think we all imagine they're going to explore that story at some point in the MCU, right? Like the black suit.
Yeah.
Does Tom Hardy voice the Venom symbiote face that pops out and talks to Peter all the time? Like, is that something that's going to happen also? Or like, are they just going to forget that that's part of the universal lore of how symbiotes work.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to deal with that. This is really interesting, especially considering that Venom comes from a different universe. Like, that kind of throws a whole wrench in this situation.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see how they handle it. Venom is not leaving the public eye anytime soon. We got the game. We got hopefully a crossover movie in the near future. But until then, Jack, where can the Agents of Excelsior find you?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at FascinatedJack. I'm very excited to continue this in review series. We have Spider-Man 1 coming up soon. So yeah,
that's this week.
That is this week, this Saturday that will be posted. So yeah, it's going to be a good time. There's more bad movies coming. At least one. There's just one bad movie coming, I think. So that'll be an interesting conversation. But yeah, it's fun to sort of go back to these older Spider-Man movies that I think we're very nostalgic for. So that'll be a good time. Very much looking forward to that. What about you, Christian?
Sure, you can follow me on Twitter, Twitch, TikTok at Chun2D2, youtube.com/joyclicks is where you can find the video version of Excelsior alongside everything else up on JoyClicks. There should be a reaction the day this posts for whoever the final Smash character is. Hoping it's Sora, but we'll see. You can check that out in the channel. But if you want the audio version of Excelsior, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, your service of choice, like Jack said, typically episodes go up every Saturday, except when there's, a movie that releases the day after we normally record. So much like Shang-Chi, this is a bonus episode. Normal episodes will continue every Saturday leading up to No Way Home. To reiterate, yes, we are continuing the Spider-Man watch-along this week. This coming Saturday, the 9th, I think, maybe the 8th, will be a new episode of Excelsior where we talk about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1. If you want the full schedule for how we're tackling the other movies for the rest of the fall, at ExcelsiorJC on Twitter. The pinned tweet is the schedule. It's basically Raimi trilogy, the Amazing movies, Spider-Verse, and then the Tom Holland movies. So excited for you to be following along. If you enjoy, you can rate or review on your service, helping the show out immensely by doing so. If you want to support us on the monetary level, patreon.com/joyclicks at the $1 and $5 tiers. $5 you get producer credit on this show and every show we do, like Aaron Easton and Charles Applin. So thank you very much. And that is going to do it for the Venom Let There Be Carnage review. Jack, did he cringe when he said the thing, when he said the movie?
No, at that point I was just like, well, there it is. I was at the acceptance stage at that point. We were like 80 minutes into the movie, so I was like, yeah, that checks out. That makes sense. Not surprised.
Fair enough. Well, until this Saturday, Excelsior.
Excelsior.